if you work hard enough, you can have whatever you want. It's interesting, right? Because we never learn if you think well enough, you can have whatever you want. Mm-hmm. Or if you're creative enough, you can create whatever you want. No, we learn if you work hard enough.
Hello and welcome to the Move the Chains podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Munsey, and I am really glad that you're here with us today for this episode of the show. Look, as an entrepreneur, best-selling author, and keynote speaker, I help executives, leaders, athletes around the world take the next steps towards success. We all need big goals, but unless we break them down and attack them one step at a time, it's easy to feel overwhelmed and to then fall short of what we're trying to accomplish. So that's what Move the Chains is all about. Every week on the show, we're bringing you the best tools and tips and tricks, proven strategies from high performers around the world, through interviews with successful folks like our guest today, Jenna, so that we can learn, how they've managed to push through to achieve their dreams, and what they've learned and can share with us to help you do the same on your journey. So like I said, our guest today is Jenna Harrison. Jenna is a top-ranked business coach, podcast host, founder of The Uncommon Way. She's a self-proclaimed reformed overworker. She helps women build more freedom, impact, and wealth in just 3 days per week. I'm not a biologist, but I'm pretty sure some of what we'll discuss today also helps men. So look, if you're a man or a woman, if you're interested in leadership, optimization, performance, you're going to enjoy this show. Jenna, welcome to the show. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Hi, Ryan. I'm so glad to be here. And that has to be the best intro ever because I think biologically you're probably correct. Something tells me.
I think so too. I always tell people, like, I find myself in very unique arenas when I'm asked to speak. Like sometimes I've been in addiction treatment places. I've been in self-defense seminars. I've been in military. I didn't serve in the military. I've never studied self-defense. I don't know much about addiction treatment, but I understand how the human psychology, physiology, biology works. And I always tell people, like, your application may be new to me, but your hardware, your software, your programming, unless you're an alien, unless you're some other species other than human, like, I know how you tick. I know how the mind and body works. And so, we're just adapting it to that. So I'm
so fairly, good. And on the receiving end,
I'm fairly certain you can do the same for us today.
Yes. And on the receiving end, it's such a skill to build as a receiver, to ask, how does this apply to me? What can I take from this? So,
yeah, it's fun to play that game and to start to connect those dots and see, hey, okay, I see what, tier 1 military operators are doing, and I see what Olympic athletes are doing. And it's a different application of the same sort of underlying principles and strategies. So it is very fun to get to play that game.
Yeah. Makes life interesting.
It does. So speaking of interesting, you have a pretty unique backstory, from the heights of the fashion industry to U.S. Army War College. How did you get here doing what you do now?
Yeah. So I say it was a very long and windy road. And part of that is because I was constantly looking to find what actually felt right for me. And there were a lot of different twists and turns from all different places we haven't mentioned as well. But I've always leaned towards high performance work. And that started to come into conflict with my sanity and my impact, honestly, at a certain point. And so I wrestled with that for a while. I'd tend to ping pong back and forth. I couldn't find that middle way. But of course, sometimes the things that we are most challenged with in our life becomes what we know so deeply and later can help others with. And that's my story.
So as you talk through that, I think what fascinates me or what might be really helpful for others to hear is, and I think this is something that you guide people through, is sort of the, like, I'll say the curse of good enough, right? And I think so many people can fall into that trap of like complacency or comfort I have a good job. I have a good life. But maybe, as you have said on your website, and as you alluded to there, it's not great. It's not what you dreamt of. It's not the thing that if you were to write out on a piece of paper what your ideal life looks like. How did you, as you just said, there were a few transitions and stops along the way. So what made you comfortable or allowed you to move away from good enough so many times and to keep sampling different things until you found what you truly loved and are passionate about?
Yeah, such a great question. And I see it often with entrepreneurs as well, because we all leave what we've known for a reason. There's something that we think we will find. And then so often we get there and then we're like, not what I expected, not what I thought was going to happen at all. And that's when I think it's a real opportunity for us to stop and say, okay, but what is that I wanted? And how can I reverse engineer that? How can I get to that? So for instance, when I left corporate, I was not looking for, some people say, I really want more time with my family and I want a slower pace. That was not me at all. I left corporate because I felt there was a ceiling on my potential. I was capped. And because I really wanted to do something that meant something to me rather than just churn out more product into the world. Yeah. And I wasn't able to find that for myself in the corporate environment. And so when I left, I was full on in the game. And I really, really wanted to just crush it. And unfortunately, what I realized was that, and I'm sure all entrepreneurs listening can, relate to this, that it just never ends. The to-do list never ends. The ideas never end. The potential of what you could be doing with your hours just never ends. And I had to come really have a moment where I realized this looked nothing like the life that I wanted to build. And I thought back, to answer your question, at points where I had, unfortunately for me, been so stubborn that the only time I would really create the change and create kind of these radical shifts from one side to the other was when things got so bad for me. I remember when I was about to leave corporate, I remember sitting under fluorescent lights, looking out at this beautiful display. It was Union Square in New York City. And there was a farmer's market below and just all these colors. It was so vibrant. And there were people strolling around at 10:30 on a Tuesday. And I thought, who are these people? What have they done? What was their karma? How did they get this? And the fluorescent lights just felt like they were sucking my soul. I was just sucking me dry. I felt such a deep existential angst, really. Mm-hmm. And it had to get to that to propel me into a different direction. And then the next time I worked, dropped out, lived in Spain for a few years and really experienced a culture where, the coveted job here is to be a postal worker. Because you have the most time off. Nobody really, there's not as much of a social hierarchy. People really care about what you do after your work. When someone asks, what do you do? They mean what are you passionate about? Do you love playing guitar? Do you love kite surfing? What do you do? And I thought that's fantastic, but I started working in that world and living that way. And I realized, oh no, I still am filling my hours, 8 hours a day with something I don't care about and something that I know is not maximizing my potential. So that wasn't for me either. And I had to hit bottom a few times to realign me with where I needed to go.
So I guess a couple of questions off of this. As you, we'll say, bounce around and try different things, and as you said earlier, I think a lot of us can relate to, you try something, and even if it works out, it may not be what you imagined, or you try something and it doesn't work out. But the ability to keep, to stay resilient and to keep trying these new things. I think a lot of folks internalize those we'll say perceived failures, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
how would you advise someone or guide someone through that trial and error process and help them to understand that if it doesn't work out, it's not because you're a failure or that there's something wrong with you?
Yeah. I feel that one. I think that high performers do have such an internal barometer on success and failure and what's possible for them. And it is easy to turn external circumstances into like an internal referendum on us. I find, though, that every time that I changed, and so this was something lucky I had built into my experience, I went on to something better. So most of the time, everything looked great on paper, regardless of what it was. Because when I was in corporate America, people thought, oh my gosh, you have it all. You have the great apartment in Manhattan, you have the great job, and you have the, bosses that love you. How could you want anything more than this? And then when I was in Spain, they were like, oh my gosh, you're living on a beach in Spain. You get to just kick back and drink, vino tinto and just eat your jamon and everything. And it always looked good, but it kept getting better and better. And so I'm lucky that I had that where I was like, nope, onto something better, as opposed to I failed at this thing that I did.
Yeah. You mentioned with a lot of entrepreneurs, there's the endless to-do list and the endless ideas.
Yeah.
In the system that you have come up with, and as and this may be a good segue into, how you teach the 24-hour work week. How do you teach people to rein in that to-do list or the never-ending list of ideas? I can imagine, or I would think that ability to see possibilities is a strength that a lot of entrepreneurs lean on, and we wouldn't want to discourage that, but maybe a governor, so to speak, or a, way to turn it off at certain times.
Yes. It's interesting because most of the people that I work with, they do have that yearning to really maximize what they're capable of, to really see what they want to do. And so it sometimes just takes one simple conversation where I'm like, okay, great. Yes, you're so mentally tough. You kicked the sugar addiction, right? You're up at 5 a.m. working out. You have all these great things to show, and yet you're still addicted to overwork. What's going on here? Right? There's still more room for you to grow. Let's tackle this next addiction. And that can be really powerful for people. People that want to be the best in everything are like, oh, wait, hold up.
That's a great
What do you mean?
I love that.
Yeah. And it's also interesting when we start to break it down, because so much of what we believe, of course, is just total bullshit. It's, we've learned it from a young age and we assume that's the way it is. I mean, when we learn, if you work hard enough, you can have whatever you want. It's interesting, right? Because we never learn if you think well enough, you can have whatever you want. Or if you're creative enough, you can create whatever you want. No, we learn if you work hard enough. And so once you enter the realm of critical thinking and you start questioning things in one part of your life, then it can very quickly ripple over into all the other areas of your life. And unfortunately, this specific one about work, it's so deeply tied up into our identity and how we see ourselves and the pride we take in our accomplishments, that it's a tricky one to divorce that from our sense of self-worth and our identity.
Yeah. So I guess given all of that, how do you coach or teach your concept of, 3 work days a week?
Yeah. So a lot of people who come to me, by the way, they really just want to stop working 70 hours and get down to maybe 50 hours. That would be wonderful for them. Sure. I also have people that really aren't interested in the 3-day work week, but they really love the idea of designing a business for them, right?
Yeah.
Where they really get to feel fully aligned and they're doing it their way. Some of my clients, they really do love working, and that's not something that they feel compelled to change. They just want to do it differently, right? Like they want to stop feeling performative. They want to stop feeling like they have to do it a certain way. And they want to really tap into their way of doing things because they believe that that will unlock greater success for them ultimately than following somebody else's rule book. But for those who are really interested in the 3-day work week, I do teach it in the form of mental toughness, that this is going to be something that we need to work through as if we were setting up a new workout routine, and that there is going to be extreme discomfort, and that we're going to work on that both cognitively with our thoughts about work and value creation, but we're also going to work on it through the body, through the nervous system. Because what happens after so many years of moving at a certain pace is that you change that. And even though it should make you feel more relaxed, it actually makes you feel more anxious to stop doing things. I don't know if you've ever been on vacation and you just feel like, I just want to pick up the phone or do something.
Yep.
And that is that nervous system in action right there.
Yep. That's my wife and I. We always joke with people and even with ourselves, we say we don't do nothing well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. And that's your nervous system.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I was just going to say, put me on that beach and I'll sit there and, 5 or 10 minutes. It's great. And then I'm like, okay, well, is there a surfboard? Is there a paddle board? Is there something?
Yes. And so what we unfortunately don't realize is that state of activation over a long time, we do see that it does shut down certain centers of the brain. So when we're running from a tiger, we don't have to think about the most creative way to run from a tiger. We just need to run from the tiger. And so there are certain centers that get shut down. And as we know, short-term stress, like short-term heightened stress, can be really helpful and productive for us. But when we're in the state that unfortunately most of our society, just with even social media and the 24-hour news cycle and everything happening and going on, and then plus our own entrepreneurial stress and our family stress and everything, we create a new baseline for what regulated feels like. And whenever we move away from that, it's detrimental. It's activating. It doesn't feel good. And that's just the body's way of moving us back to what it knows has helped us survive until now. And anything other than that is a threat.
So I guess that's some of the physiology and even psychology. I guess I'm curious from a tactical perspective on this. Can you touch on how putting constraints on the work week can actually improve productivity?
Yes, absolutely. So one way I just did touch on slightly, which is that when you are in a more relaxed, regulated state, it opens different centers of the brain and they can function at their full capacity, which is what we all want, of course. Mm-hmm. And those centers are places like our creativity, our advanced problem solving, our reasoning, and also our sense of connection and community. So you'll tend to be, after you've had a really great workout, that's sometimes where you get that great idea, right? The thing that you maybe have been butting your head against the wall for 2 weeks, you have one great vacation day or one great, workout or something, and boom, there it is. It just came to you. And that's what we're seeing actually in action. But another thing that happens is that when you're confronted with the constraint and the limitation, your brain naturally has to problem solve for problems that would have come later in your business. So you end up solving them earlier. Usually what happens is there's a system that needs to be improved in order to make a 3-day work week possible. There's something in the offer that needs to be improved, for instance, to help your sales or to help your delivery or to help, the lead flow process. Mm-hmm. Or there's something in you that has to change. So frequently, we don't actually believe it's possible to work with fill in the blank, those types of clients, or to have those kinds of employees working for us, right? That would make it easy to manage them. No, it's so difficult to find good help, is what we tell ourselves. Really and that creates a lot of extra time for us because we're always having to follow behind our employees and clean up messes. And so what happens when you constrain yourself is you no longer have the latitude to be messy, right? You need to run a much tighter ship. And ultimately that improves your business.
I love that. You no longer have the latitude to be messy. You talk a little bit about in that answer, you as the individual being a constraint on the business. And so, as I'm looking through your work, one of the things that really stuck out to me was this idea of constantly leveling up. And specifically from a business standpoint, that one resonated with me because when I had my gym and was a part of a mastermind years ago, the guy that led that group told us something very similar. And it was this concept of, if you don't grow and develop as the business owner, you become the ceiling. And that's sort of the ceiling of complexity and things that will put constraints on, what the business is capable of. So, how do you walk people through or guide people through that process of, recognizing that they are the ceiling and that responsibility of continuing to level up beyond just I think most performers are interested in, or most high performers are interested in growth and development, but may not see it through the lens of how it impacts others and the organizations that they're a part of.
Yeah. So the people that I work with, they know they're going to be in for a mindset treat when they come and work with me. So one of the things that I actually screen for is self-awareness. Okay. In the people that I work with. However, when, even though that's true and people have a certain level of self-awareness, always there will be blind spots. Even a, brain surgeon can't do surgery on herself. And so that's why we have coaches, or we have really dear mentors, friends, people that can really tell us, what they're seeing and how it is. And that, I think, is something that we really need to remove the shame from. Is the fact that we just have blind spots. We just have really smart brains that know us very, very well and can pull the wool over our eyes. And in a very wonderful way, they want to keep us right where we are. So a lot of the people that I find that tell me you just can't find good help, deep down, they really don't want to release the reins. They want to have that sense of, self-worth where they're, they're so needed in their company. And so in terms of helping people see that, I'm just the kind of person that tells it like it is. And usually it's hard to deny once you're seeing the results in front of yourself. Yeah. I don't know if you find that as well with your clients, that once you see it, you can't unsee it as easily.
Right. I think of those conversations a lot of times as sort of being a mirror, that they're able to hold up in front of themselves and see, or sometimes when you have a photograph and you're like, oh, this is what it looks like. And I think when folks see it in a different way, or when it's presented in a concrete way, it is very hard to deny it. And as you said, when the brain and the subconscious can't play those tricks that it likes to play to rationalize or hide things.
Right. And I don't know about you, but I love it when I find something out like that. It feels good in my body. It feels like a light bulb just went off. It feels amazing. And all of a sudden you don't yet see the path of how to get there. But as soon as you know, oh my gosh, I have been creating situations where I can't trust my team, there's a solution in sight, because that causes a lot of pain when you feel like, oh my gosh, I have such big dreams, but damn it, I'm spending all my time cleaning up these messes. And then you finally know I'm going to get to pursue those dreams, and I'm going to have supportive, crack team members that are going to help me get there. I mean, that feels really good. Yeah.
That's awesome. What you talked about screening for self-awareness in your intake process. Do you do anything to help your clients create better screening processes for their businesses to help build those crackpot teams like you just talked about?
Yes, absolutely. For teams, but also for clients. Because what I find with a lot of the women that I work with is that in the desire to grow, they end up settling for less than ideal clients, and that creates so much extra time in their business. We all know the 80-20 rule, that we tend to spend 80% of our time on 20% of our clients. And when we can, I don't know if that, I don't know if that has to be true, quite frankly. I think that that's kind of an inherent system. That's kind of the entropy that just is, if there's no external force acted upon it to change it. But really, we have the possibility to, as entrepreneurs, call our own shots. And we should always be looking, not just for our best clients, but who we work best with, right? Like, what is our uncommon edge? What are we really helping people with, where they get the most value and we get the most satisfaction? And it actually feels really energizing to do this work.
Well, you just mentioned our uncommon edge. So you're the founder of The Uncommon Way. Your website is The Uncommon Way. Talk to us about this uncommon edge. What is it? How do we figure out what it is? How do we leverage it?
Yeah. So I really came up with the language around this. I believed in it for a long time. I've talked about the uncommon way. I've seen it in action with myself, with my clients. But really, as I hike around here in Mallorca, I started noticing these olive trees that grow right out of the rock. And they have no irrigation. They have nothing that would make you think that this would be a good place for them to grow. The soil's very arid. There's nothing. It's like they got nothing, but they're thriving. They're doing so well. What's interesting, though, if you take that same tree and you put it in an area that you would think is the best farming conditions in the world, say the Mississippi Delta, with really nutrient-dense soil, lots of moisture, that olive tree will just rot and die. It's not going to survive well. And that really gave me language to talk about this fact that we need to find our right conditions, right? We need to find what is really best for us. Is it that dry, arid soil? Is it the more nutrient-dense, supportive environment? And when we can really lean into that, we can start to also ask ourselves, like, what is it we do best? What's our secret sauce? All of that comes together to really create this uncommon edge. It's like an unfair advantage that we have in business. And usually what happens is we're so close to it that we don't think that it could be that easy, or we don't think that, that people would actually pay for that, because that's something that everyone can do. But when you can tap into not only what is my zone of genius, but how is the best way that I create that value? Maybe it is in a 3-day work week. Who would have thought? Who knew? Right? But maybe it's not. Maybe it's in some other way. And what are the specific, for instance, even platforms? Do I really need to be on social media? Or is there this other way where I actually do better in terms of generating leads and bringing in my ideal clients? When you allow yourself to ask those questions and really lean in and really own it, that is just, that's where the alchemy happens. That's where it starts to feel too good. And that's what the uncommon edge is all about.
So you mentioned owning it, and that's another aspect of your work that really jumped out to me. Specifically around the challenge that a lot of people may face in communicating the value of what they do.
Sure.
So how do you help people become more comfortable, I guess, embracing their true value and then communicating it to others?
Yeah. So I see the embracing the true value part. It's actually the first platform. So out of 3 pillars, one would be know yourself. The second would be really know your people. And then the third is talk about how those two connect. right? In terms of why you're doing this offer, why you do things this way, why you're, the way that you work is the best for them. And so that first piece, that knowing yourself, is where a lot of people fumble, right? They really don't take the time to ask themselves, what is it that I do better than anyone else? What is it that I'm really here to do? What is it? Because they tend to just respond. It's a passive energy. It's like, well, this is what people want me to help them with, or this is what so-and-so told me would be a really great, revenue producer. And when you're moving from that passive energy rather than leading with a really active energy of this is what I'm here to do, right? No one else does it like me. No one else thinks about it in this way. No one has this background specifically to support it, right? Then all of a sudden you have no competition. And it's a beautiful place to be, but it allows a lot more conviction when you talk about your value, when you know it so deeply, right? And when you've done the work, because our brain never produces evidence for us other than what we've already told it to look for. We all know this. So when you are a person who said, but that can't be, is that really that important? Or would that really be valued in the marketplace? If you've been using questions like that, chances are you haven't found tons of support to tell you otherwise. Otherwise, you'd already be doing it in your business. Right. So you do need to go and look for that evidence, talk to new people specifically with that new lens in order to help yourself lean into that conviction. But part of what we do now in everything that we do in modern world is challenging our thoughts, building new beliefs. I think 50 years ago, people weren't doing that as much as they do now. So we all have the skills, we all have the possibility to do it. And when you can combine that kind of conviction, that deep knowing about what you do, and therefore you don't need to dim yourself in any way or try and be something you're not or be performative. This is what I do and this is who I work with. Then the second piece where people can kind of falter when it comes to communicating their value is that they stop speaking like their clients, and they stop speaking, or they need to start speaking like their clients. There we go. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And so when we don't know our clients well enough, we don't understand how they speak, then there's such a disconnect. And the truth is they will tell you exactly what they want. So often people are like, I can do this, and it sounds all corporate and there's this wonderful transformative language, but the person is actually saying that they want something very straightforward and simple. Mm-hmm. And if they really wanted the transformative thing, like let's say, I help empower women to make really transformative decisions. They may be like, well, that sounds nice. Maybe I'll think about that someday. But if deep down what they're thinking is, I want to be brave enough to ditch my loser boyfriend, that's what they want help with. Right. Right. And you probably will help empower them to make transformative decisions, right? But you need to be able to speak to exactly what they're talking about. And I have clients that say, well, but I went through this myself, so I already know how my clients talk, right? Because I too was struggling as in this part of this, organization to really create great analytics. And now I developed this system. And so I know what they're going through. True. But the way you think now is worlds apart from how you thought even 3 months ago. We change so quickly, our perspectives, absolutely. We become new people. And so we need to be able to actually, really, really listen, actively listen, and then create that connection for them, which is the third part, that connection between what they really want and how we are the solution.
Yeah. So I want to come back to that third part, just going back to speaking their language. I'm laughing because it's so true. And I see that happen so much. Again, the same mentor that I had in the gym chapter of my life, he was a great marketer, and he taught us to one of the ways that we would try to close that gap. He always said, just go to the supermarket once a month and you buy, all the fitness magazines that are on the shelf. Buy Men's Health, Men's Fitness, Oxygen, Shape, whatever. And you steal the headlines, right? Like the, 6 foods for a flat belly. Because as a strength coach or a nutritionist, as a scientist, our minds, very much like the corporate world or the tech nerds, like we're so deep into the things that we want to say things like, prioritize fat oxidation and blah, 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 blah. And it's like the average person is just like, dude, I just want to wear smaller jean sizes. Like I want to burn fat. Like I want to get rid of this. And they grab their midsection. It's like, so yeah, that is such a valuable lesson to learn how to speak like your client does. And that doesn't just have to be marketing. I've got a coaching client right now who he's moved up 2 rungs of the corporate ladder in the last year and a half, largely based on his ability to better articulate and communicate his value to the C-suite and, that level at the company. The performance has always been there, but that inability to communicate those things caused them to not recognize, his full value. And so as he's gotten better at that, and we've had that same lesson of like, look, like he's a CIO now, and it's like, look, you can't speak, the way you can't speak to the C-suite at your company the way that you speak when you're on stage at an industry event talking about artificial intelligence or technology or whatever. And so I love that's such an important pillar of what you do, because I've seen it in multiple instances be a really critical aspect of closing that gap for a lot of different people.
Yeah. And, to be fair, there are some people that would be your clients that do want to talk about fat oxidation.
Sure.
But like you're saying, know your audience. Are you talking to the C-suite or are you at an industry conference? Yep. Know who you're talking to. And that's another problem I find, is that people don't know exactly who their clients are. They don't know who they're trying to reach. And then that creates a lot of confusion. I always say if you're confused, they're confused.
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's another, a quote that I pulled off of your site. I love this, that no amount of marketing can make up for a lack of clarity. So what are some of the things that you do to help folks close that gap? Whether it's communication or perception of, the value that your clients provide for their clients.
Yeah. So I started out actually creating all of the copy for my clients. Well, not started out. When I got into business coaching, I started out as a performance coach, and then I attracted a lot of entrepreneurs, started helping them with their business because I wanted them to succeed too. And they started calling me their business coach. And then I went through a funny thing where I said, well, if I'm a business coach, I need to be helping them with all of these tactical business things like doing their copy. It was just a thought error that came up in my brain. Took me a year or 2 to work through that. But what I'm seeing now is that there is so much. I mean, so often we're doing everything right except what actually works for us, right? So there's so much of us that has been told, for instance, use these type of headlines or do it this way in your industry or speak to these kind of people. They're the ones who will actually pay. And actually what I'm doing in order to help them create the most compelling messaging is to really clear a lot of that noise away and get back into just very basic human to human connection. How would you say this to someone that you really knew well, right? How would you say this to someone that you could just say the whole truth to, that you didn't have to like dim yourself or you didn't have to, coddle them in any way. You could just speak your truth. Mm-hmm. And I believe that when I can help somebody find their own words, then I've won. Yeah.
That's such a challenge to find your own way of saying those things. It's funny.
I'll tell you a story. I had a client who really felt like I've been doing everything right, where the business should be much further ahead by now. What is going on? What's the block that I don't see? And early on, I had asked her, if you had to guess, what do you think it would be? And she said, I think I'm not being bold enough in terms of how I'm talking about what I do. And we kind of put that aside. We did some of the work that I do because I have a process where I take people through these steps of clarity, of really the foundational pieces of understanding where they want to go next in their business. Mm-hmm. And one of the pieces of that was that she needed to create more opportunity for herself for deep thinking, which required her to work a little less and start resting a little more. Mm-hmm. And she was very, very resistant to this. But she decided to just try it on a short-term basis, which is how it works for a lot of my clients. Like, I'm not going to go there, but I'm willing to do this for just, a couple of weeks and see what happens. And then she started having her downloads. And she started coming to each call saying, I was thinking about when I'm trying to say this, maybe I could explain it this way, right? Or I could do it this way. Before long, I don't know if I should say the name of the company, but why not? Home Depot was calling her to give keynote speeches because of the way, the exact language, the perfect acronym she'd put together to describe this specific problem that certain women entrepreneurs have. And that it only happens when you start asking your brain to give it its best stuff, your best stuff. Because so typically we're telling our brain, we're assigning our brain to play the game, to do well with someone else's rules, right? Let me be more like that. Let me do it more this way. And when we can clear that and give it space to be like, how would I say it? What do I really want to do? That's when the magic starts coming. And that's the thing that no one else could replicate.
You've got a military grade mindset technique that helps high-level entrepreneurs rewire their brains and their nervous systems. Can you walk us through that 3-step process?
Yeah, for sure. So the nervous system really sets your ceiling. You can't go further than your nervous system allows, because you'll always start returning to the place that feels safest for you. And for a lot of people, maybe that looks like overwork. It looks like great performance, but it still is a ceiling. And if you really want to clear the way, you need to be supported. And that sounds like, could that actually be possible? But it is absolutely scientifically proven that when we're in states of activation, we aren't going to be able to excel in the same way as when we're in a flow state, which is another word for this kind of baseline, rested state that we're in. And so we start to notice that when there's like a push-pull energy, I call it. It's sort of like when you're dating, and with one hand you're telling the person, come closer, and with the other you're holding it up like a stop sign and saying, not too close, not too close. Mm-hmm. And that push-pull energy happens in our business too, where we want to grow, but we kind of don't want to grow, right? Or we want this level of success, but we kind of don't want this level of success. And so whenever we're reaching a plateau, we've noticed we've plateaued for a while, and we really need to rewire that, reset that kind of thermostat. That's where this work comes in. So the 3 pillars of this is awareness is the first step, interruption is the second, and then acclimation is the third. So awareness is what we all know. We have to know where our triggers are. We have to know where we tend to get tripped up in terms of our limiting beliefs and the things that are fears that are, internally deep down running the show. We need to start noticing, for instance, I had a client that she had some burnout in the past. And so she was so nervous every time she really wanted to grow this wonderful, like life-changing membership program that she had. But every time she saw those numbers start to inch up, she would get all nervous, right? She'd start to feel like, oh God, I'm going to go back into that state of just burning myself out, working so much. I can't handle this capacity. Mm-hmm. And so we had to become aware that that's what was happening, because that wasn't necessarily true. That was just old lingering trauma actually in her body that was creating that memory again, replaying over and over. And then the second step, of course, is to interrupt that when it's starting to happen. So the brain is actually very, very, it's very simple in that it takes a stimulus in, it does some processing, and then there's a response that comes out. And typically that response is in the form of chemicals in our bloodstream. And so when the stimulus for her was seeing the marker tick up in her membership numbers, and then the processing that went in her brain was danger, right? And then adrenaline, cortisol, whatever is coming out in her bloodstream, that's the response. We need to interrupt that pattern, because it's also, thanks to the plasticity of the brain, it's perfectly normal or perfectly possible for her to see numbers ticking up and then to instead get excited, right? Or feel relieved, right? I'm sure there are so many people thinking, if I saw that, I'd feel X. Right. And that just proves that there's an infinity of different ways that she could feel, or that her body could react, or a different, cocktail of hormones that could be coursing through her bloodstream rather than the ones that were wired in. And so that interruption pattern is where often it's just a physical interrupt is the most effective, quick way to do it, is to notice it happening and just snap a rubber band on your wrist. Right. Or I had one client that she felt it so heavy. She felt it was so true that she needed something very silly to shake herself out of it. And so when she noticed that trigger start again, she'd go, blah, blah, blah. And it just made her laugh. It seems like, could it be that simple? But think about it. You are literally changing the pathway of your brain. You're telling yourself, you're training your brain to think about that stimulus or react to that stimulus in a different way. It can no longer go from A to C, because now it's going A to B to C, right? And then we can make it go from A to B to D to something completely different. So it's a step-by-step process, but that in short is what you're doing, is you're interrupting and then you're acclimating to a new normal. So if you are afraid of that higher capacity, you can't just expect your body to be happy with it. You have to practice being in the state of it, feeling it, feeling the discomfort. I'm sure you do this with so many of your clients as well at the performance level, right? We have to be able to, it can be through visualization. It can be through putting yourself in that environment and desensitizing yourself to it. There's so many different ways to do this, but what you're really doing when it comes down to it is you're acclimating yourself to a new state that felt threatening and no longer needs to be threatening. For a lot of my clients, that's having wealth. That high level of wealth actually feels threatening. It might change who they are. They may become completely disconnected. They may not have the same friend group, but they need to surround themselves with wealth to be able to relax and to see that it's nothing. They're going to be fine. Right. They're still going to be them.
Yeah. I love that whole process and the way that you, explained it. I think that's incredibly valuable for folks to hear. We're coming up on the end of our time. I do want to be respectful of your time. A couple, I guess, two closing questions that we'll ask every guest. Number one is going to be an easy one. Where can folks get more of you, follow your content, or learn more about what you do?
Oh, I would love to see, any of your listeners that want to drop me a note. I love to talk about this subject. Please come spend more time with me. I'm at theuncommonway.com, but I'm also at The Uncommon Way everywhere else. So very easy to find. I have a podcast called The Uncommon Way. I'm on the socials at The Uncommon Way. So you really can't miss me.
All right. We'll link to all of those in the description, make it easy on folks. So if you're listening, just go to the description, click on that, and you'll be able to find more of Jenna. Okay. So now, Jenna, final question. If one of our listeners, or for all of our listeners who want to get better at moving the chains or develop more consistency, what would be your best advice for somebody to accomplish that?
Yeah, to really, really make that difference and start creating those new results, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would be, the first thing would be to take at least, to start training your body to access that relaxed state, which is going to be your highest level flow state. And so that can be awareness on when you've been able to access it in the past would be the best way, because some people actually do access it in different terms of heightened emotion. But if you're not sure, then I recommend just starting with a mini vacation. So this could just be even 60 seconds where you just stop and really imagine yourself in your idea of the best vacation ever. It could be scaling a mountain, it could be sitting on a beach in Mexico, doesn't matter, but where is that place that feels like, oh, this is what I've been saving for. This is like where I really feel tuned in. And even if that's just 60 seconds and maybe you do it once a day, then you start doing it 2 times a day, then 3 times a day, you're going to create incredible change.
I love it. It's definitely an uncommon answer. We don't get that one for how to be more consistent. But no, Jenna, this has been an awesome, great conversation. A lot of really useful stuff here. Thanks for being a part of the show today. For everybody listening, thank you for being here. Thanks for listening. And if you enjoy this show, please share it with somebody that you know who will benefit from the things that we're talking about here. And if you really enjoy it, please leave us a review. Those do help. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for being here.